Hi, Melissa Bill, and welcome to the Business Roundup, where we catch up with the movers and shakers in the business world. Today, joining me is John Lex Robinson. He's a best-selling author, Army veteran, tech executive with over 30 years of experience in leadership. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I greatly appreciate it.
So we were talking a little bit before we got started that the business world is definitely changing with AI and technology, and it's evolving at a really rapid rate. And I know your new book, Executive 2.0, is kind of like a 90-day roadmap to kind of help leaders navigate through this. Can you kind of first talk a little bit about your background and then what prompted you to write the book?
Yes, absolutely. I think so. You covered my background nicely, kind of with all that high level stuff, right? So my initial work out of high school, I went straight into the Army, and I graduated with an engineering degree after I got out of the military. And I have done everything in technology. I'll put it this way: this is what I like to tell my son. I built the darn internet. This is literally what I started with, was the physical build networks, do all of those types of things, worked my way up through, managing development, software development, and all the way through architecture, power systems. And then eventually the last several years of my career here, I've worked in cybersecurity and those types of things. So I've had just this wide exposure across the board. And I think, pardon me, to kind of dive into the second part of that question, right, with Executive 2.0, I would say particularly over the last 10 to 15 years, but maybe even longer, in the technology space, we've done a really poor job of developing great leaders. We build really cool technology, very powerful technology, and we have just simply not kept up on the leadership side of that in terms of how do we manage and appropriately deploy what we're creating, either as services or products to customers and clients. And I think that seeing that gap was what I really wanted to fill, just from my own perspective. So that's really the genesis of the book and the community that kind of goes with what we're talking about today. And I just think the lack of leadership that I see in the way that I would talk about it, is part of why we see so many problems with social media and in our society, and how technologies, when they fail us, they just fail us at this exponential pace and rate. And I think with AI coming, it becomes even more important that we get better at leading technology rather than being led by.
Right. A lot of people said it's evolving so quickly and people don't know what the future holds. They don't know what's going to happen with it. And where we got to be, like you're saying, ahead of it and like guiding where this is going to be going and, not just kind of waiting for things to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we, not to be like too short about it, but we have a choice to make now, of what we do with AI. And I have very strong opinions on what AI is and is not, but we have a choice to make now as leaders in the business now, and in what we're encouraging people to do in the future. Are we going to lead the machines and make the decisions, or are the machines going to continue to kind of lead us along? Or maybe I should say, to be more clear, even the people behind the development of AI. And it's a massive influence, but particularly considering social media and how that works and how people interact with it. We seem to have stepped away from, and I talk about this in the ethics section of the book, we see a little bit, we seem to have stepped away from the accountability piece of it and the human-centered nature of that. And I think that that's probably what concerns me the most. I mean, the speed is speed, right? Things are going to continue to move. It's up to us to step back as people and say, wait, take a breath. What are we actually building? What's the impact of what we're building? And that requires leadership skills, not technology skills, not engineering skills, because the machines, and I use that term a lot, the machines don't care. They're not going to put meaning into things. You don't trust machines, you trust people, right? And we have to just begin to understand. And I think maybe the last thing to maybe help us along here a little bit is, AI, the real threat of AI isn't that it's autonomous and it's going to take over. The real threat of AI for us is it's going to become really competent at management skills. It can manage a process. It can manage a procedure. It can do basic data analysis. And the fact that that's there means the space left for people in this are all the human-based skills. It is communication and collaboration and creative problem solving, the integration of ethics into what we do and how we make our decisions. That's where people shine. That's what we do that technology itself does not. And I think we've just lost sight of some of that as we've developed over the last, at least over the last 15 years.
Yeah, someone made a good point too. They were just saying it only knows what we put into it. Because even in the medical field, they were saying it's
Mhm.
a little bit scary because, it can't take the place of the doctors putting in their notes and doing their daily thing. It only knows
Right.
what does the past, not what's going to be the future.
Right.
So,
Right. And so it's not, and not to like, not to just beat up on AI or say we should be afraid of it at all. That's really not my viewpoint. I think what gets sold as what we should be afraid of in AI is just not the case at all. It is not actually intelligent. It is not actually autonomous. It is designed to run the way that it runs by people. And I'll just be really blunt about this. We need to start holding people accountable for what they build and put out into the world. And we're not really doing it. And I think that as a father and as somebody who's been in technology, I don't want to see it to continue to go that way. That's why I wanted to bring back in the human side of it and say, look, we need to be human centered. When we think about design principles and the design principles that I talk about in the book, and I tried to combine them some with flow state science. This is straight out of Stanford's design school. Their whole process starts with empathy and understanding. What's actually going to provide value to my clients? And I love the medical example conversation that you had earlier, like bringing that back up because I want to steal a phrase from them. Perhaps in technology leadership, we need to borrow the phrase "do no harm" because we're doing a lot of harm today, whether we want to state that and be upfront about it or not. We are, and I think we can see that to the impact on our children and our society as a whole, and how we're just very divisive and very falling apart, and the impacts of what social media does and overload of information does to individuals are incredibly negative. And I'm never a doomsayer. Could get much worse.
right, and you want to nip that in the bud, and that kind of brings
Yeah.
us to one of the questions: is how faith leadership is failing this AI era. Like, what's happening? Like, what does real authority look like, and what is not
Yeah.
real authority?
Yeah. So I'm gonna back it up just a hair and say, well, how do I end up in a place where I have so much performative leadership going on? So because we've done such a bad job, I know in technology, I'll stick to technology as my wheelhouse. In this space, we've done such a bad job of training the next set of leaders to be leaders because what we have a tendency to do is say, hey, Lex is a really great developer. Melissa's a really great engineer. Hey, guess what, Melissa? Now I'm going to put you in charge of all of our engineers, and I'm not going to teach you how to lead. I'm not going to teach you how to think about our mission, how to stay clear and to be on target, all of the skills that are actually required to be a great leader. I'm just going to say sink or swim. We've done this. That's what I mean when I say for 10 or 15 years, that's what we've done. So, what a lot of people will do in that position, if it was you or me or others, and I've done it myself, so mea culpa, you fake it till you make it.
Mhm. True.
And what happens is, well, now I'm making decisions that in the AI world, with the speed and pace and scale of it, if I make a bad decision, it's exponentially bad for people because I'm kind of faking it. I might not really understand what I'm after. I might not really get the implications of producing something in the way that I'm producing it. And so we put people in a negative position and said, sink or swim. Nobody's going to come out and say, I'm a terrible leader. They're going to perform as if, with not realizing they don't necessarily have the skills. So that's kind of the negative side of it. And what I think is the generation of it. And trying to remove direct blame on people. I just think that's the way we've grown as an industry. Right. I just want us to be honest about it. So what is human? Like, what does real leadership look like? So it looks like you and I having a real conversation, me really understanding what you're after, what's going to be of benefit to you and not. So it's that real mental clarity on where are we going. It's the ability to communicate well. It's the integration of ethical judgment, not as an afterthought in technology, but as a requirement for how it's built, back to that whole do no harm kind of principle. And it's integrating those things in that we need to do, right? And I don't want to sound awful about this. We are great at managing processes, but not leadership. And as somebody who was trained as an engineer, I know why. It's because I was taught I can create the perfect process that never fails. True in a bubble that does not include human beings. And so you have to bring people back into that because we're the most unpredictable component of any environment, which is also why AI is going to struggle and why you don't really want to trust it for predictive analytics or maybe not necessarily trust it for decision making because it just does not have that scope of capability that a human being has to look across that whole spectrum of impacts.
Yeah, definitely very true. And like, what are some of the practical ways to align, like you were talking about, like your energy focus and the decision making? for better performance moving
Yeah,
forward?
so I stepped all the way back in the book because I'm like, how did I make it through all of this? I've been through burnout and I've seen what it is. And I honestly believe that we create better leaders by creating better individuals. Let's just put it that way. And the way that you up your performance is to become a professional about how you perform. And for me, that looks like very practical ways of integrating recovery into what you do. If you look at professional athletes, a true professional athlete that we think of as great, right? They spend time in recovery, taking care of their bodies, then they go practice, then they go perform. So if we were to all think of ourselves as corporate athletes in some sense, we need to operate with the same sense of rhythm. And so recovery for me is the very first practical thing. So if somebody is listening to this and thinks they're in burnout, here's the news clip. You're already there. Go take a nap. When you get to the end of your workday today, the most practical thing I teach people, when you get to the end of your workday, let it be the end of your workday. Shut off notifications. Don't keep reading emails. Don't go home and binge on Netflix or the news or anything else. Eat a great clean meal and get a great night's sleep. And then the whole idea of aligning to your energy sounds kind of woo woo to some people, but we all inherently know, look, I do my best work probably 10 a.m. to 1. For you, it might be 2 to 4 in the afternoon. And it's realizing that if that's when I'm at my peak, that's when I need to perform. So I'm going to take the most important work to me. I'm going to set aside focus time and I'm going to do it right then because now I'm going to perform at my best on the things that matter most to me, my family, the business that I'm working for, or whomever it may be. So hopefully that's a few little check marks there of practical things. It may not sound practical, but they are immensely so.
And do you think just I'm just out of curiosity, your
Yeah.
time in like in, the military had any like to help you kind of put things in a better perspective, or no, that's just kind of life skills that you've learned?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Yes. And I don't think I realized that until 20 years later. And what it really gave to me and what it gives to a lot of people that are in is we'll use the word discipline, but it's really rhythm, right? You get into this rhythm of a way and pattern of behaving and operating that you may not realize it because I was 17 when I went in. I don't think I realized till much later that the reason I was burned out was because I wasn't operating this way, right? I would work late because I wanted to impress the boss or I wanted to get more work done. I didn't get enough sleep. I went through all the same burnout stuff that everybody else is experiencing. And I think I came back to that understanding much later on because when you're younger, 20s, 30s, I mean, I'm almost 60 now, so I'm getting up there. I don't think you feel it as much, so you don't see the need for it. But yeah, certainly. I never thought of it that way, Melissa. So that's a great question. Yes, absolutely. It made a huge difference in the way I approach it.
Yeah, just wondering because I noticed like different things that even that I've gone through, you change my perspective and have grounded me more so than I was, when I was younger and the way I thought about things. Just it was just curious
Oh,
to me.
yeah.
And now, as far as insights, we talked a little bit about ethics and AI. What are some things that every professional kind of needs to know to stay credible?
With the development of AI in particular?
Yes.
Yeah,
And just
so I'm gonna stick with I'm gonna go back to I guess I'll call it empathy first design. What we've not done well or maintained over the years is this idea of do we really understand what our clients and consumers want and actually need, or are we producing what we want to sell? Because there's a big difference between those things. So just that as a foundation. And then I think with AI in particular, you will probably have already had lots of conversations around privacy. So a lot of people are going to bring privacy up. They're going to talk about the removal of bias from your data sets or understanding if you're creating bias in the results that your product puts out from AI. But I think the big ones for me are going to be transparency. How did I build what I built? How is it making its decisions? How is it trying to analyze this data? Like, I don't need everybody's trade secrets, but I need to at least be able to see what you're doing. And then I think accountability is huge. What I don't like about today's marketing and the way we talk about AI is because we make it sound like it's autonomous, that is in some ways saying it's not Alexa's fault, it's the AI's fault. And I think what I need to do if I come out and I build something that causes damage or harm or doesn't function the way that I intend it to, I can't blame what I just built. I have to blame myself. That level of accountability I don't see happening, to just be very frank, that people are not really willing to come out and say, look, I built a piece of garbage here and it made a mistake, right? They're like, well, AI does this and AI is hard. No, it is not hard. We just did not do a good job doing what we intended to do with it. And that really then the last step then becomes the governance of it. And from a leadership perspective, no, you do not need to be an expert coder in AI. You don't have to be a machine language engineer to be a great leader in this space, but you need to understand that you have to set in place the governance to ensure all of those things I just talked about are a part of the process of what I'm developing with AI. I think that that's the critical piece for leaders to understand.
And now a big part of that too is gonna be building trust, probably, and kind of
Yeah.
in the
So
digital age.
yeah, I think just kind of to round that out, right? We do not trust, we might think we do, but we don't trust the product. We trust the people that made the product, or we don't. And I think a great example of that, just to kind of give it a little bit of an analogy, is you can look at 2020 and COVID, and whichever side of the fence anybody wants to feel like they're on, you're basing that on whatever information you got and whomever you trusted. It's that simple. And the same thing is really true for us as leaders now. I need to develop trust with you by being open and honest and consistent and transparent, all of those things that we just talked about. If I want my product to be more than something that I sold to you this year, and then you let it go because it didn't really do what I said it was going to do, or it didn't deliver on what I told you it could deliver for you. And if you don't trust me to do that well, eh, you're gonna, I'm going to lose you as a customer or a client because you've seen then I've produced a thing that doesn't really do what I said, and I'm out. And that trust
Yeah,
is really hard to get back.
that's true, once you kinda let that person down or something. And what are some of the other things that I know we covered quite a bit, but some of the other
Yeah.
things that you go through in your book?
So I think in the book, there's really five pillars that I talk about, and I've tried to approach this from my perspective of what has worked for me. But there's mental clarity. So in the mental clarity piece, I'm literally talking about your mental clarity, not even the clarity of what I'm doing with my business, but just for the self. Simple things like before this call, I'm going to sit down and just do some simple breath work. I'm going to relax. I'm going to let myself just perform. Then there's physical vitality, and I learned this as a father. To be a great leader as a father for a son who wants to run around and do a lot of things, if I'm not physically vital, I cannot be present for him. That is such a basic, and I wish more parents understood you are leaders, whether you kind of know it or not. So I love thinking about it that way. So there's mental clarity and physical vitality. And then I really went back into communication and collaboration and how do you connect with people. We did also in the book, in addition to the ethics, the last big section is there was really around creative problem solving. And I'll just call it innovation on purpose and setting yourself up with some simple frameworks to say, look, I can follow the Stanford design model without going to Stanford. And I can produce at a flow state rate of production if I just combine a few things. And so I wanted to put those things together to empower an individual to say, okay, now I've got control over me and what I'm doing. Now I am actually more prepared to actually lead others, or I'm more prepared to lead the development of a product or a service. And so that's really the layout of the whole book. And then we have the community on there, and every month we go through new topics. I try to pull in whatever's going on, or maybe we need to step back into like, how do you just manage your day? So we talk about a lot of different things, and the whole focus is just leadership, self leadership, strategy. Because honestly, and I didn't say this at the beginning, I don't have a lot of faith that MBAs know anything about leadership. I think they know a lot about business, but leadership is a different thing. They know a lot about management, but that's not the same as leadership. I don't have a lot of faith that what we've done in terms of the weekend conference lasts beyond the conference. So the whole reason for the book and the community is, can we just have a conversation? Let's continue to talk about it, and let's invite people in that this is something they know they need and want, and try to just service that community. And really it's Q&A. And that's what we've done from the beginning with.
That's true. And now if people wanted more information on the book, just things that you're got going on that you're doing, what would be the best way to find
Yeah.
it?
So the best way to find it is really executive20.com. And that's, of course, executive with no E at the front because I was trying to be cool and modern, right? I mean, I'll throw that out there, be honest about it. So it's executive20.com. People can also find a lot of what else I do on the Veros group, and I can share these links with you so you can put them with the podcast and all of that.
Perfect.
You can find me you can find me on LinkedIn, John Lex Robinson. You put it in there, you'll see me. And so I think I'd love to continue this conversation with you and anybody that wants to engage with it.
Okay, wonderful. It'd be great to have you back too in the future and talk a little bit more about what's going on because I'm sure we're
Sure.
going to changes as we head into 2026 too. So
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
You bet. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining the Business Roundup, where we always try to bring you interviews with some of the leading people in business, whether it be technology, finance, or energy. I hope you tune in. I hope you subscribe and listen, and we'll give you updates for new interviews that are coming up. Until next time, I'm Melissa Bill.